of those committee members present this evening. But before doing so, can I ask if there are any apologies regarding attendance? Okay, I'm not hearing any apologies and I haven't been informed beforehand. So if I could ask our legal officer, Colin, you to call the members, please.
Yes, members, when your name is called, please turn your camera on, declare your presence and then turn off your microphone. Beginning Councillor Mrs. Ashton. Mrs. Ashton. No. Mr. Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister. No. Councillor Ian Byrne. Ian Byrne. No. Martin Bond, St Helens.
I'm present, Chair.
Okay, good, thank you. Chris Carubia, Councillor Chris Carubia.
Yeah, hi, Councillor Carubia here, present. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Councillor Pat Cleary.
Yes, present, Colin, thank you.
Councillor Tony Cottier. Tony Cottier.
Tony's not a member of Pensions Committee.
Oh, right. Okay.
Councillor Adrian Jones has replaced Councillor Cottier.
Right. Is Councillor Adrian Jones here? No, no. Councillor George Davis.
Councillor George Davis present.
Okay. Councillor Steve Fowkes.
Councillor Steve Fowkes present.
Okay. Councillor Andrew Gardner.
Andrew Gardner present.
Okay. Councillor Tony Jones.
Councillor Tony Jones present. Good evening, everybody.
Councillor Brian Kenny.
Councillor Brian Kenny present. Thank you.
Paulette Lappin from Sefton. Paulette Lappin. No, no. Councillor Terry Povell.
Hello, good evening. Councillor Cherry Povell present.
Yes, sir. And Councillor Les Rowlands.
Good evening, Councillor Les Rowlands present.
Yes. Okay, roll call finished, Chair.
Thanks very much, Colin. Okay, item 3 on the agenda is Members' Code of Conduct, Declarations of Interest. So members of the committee are asked to declare any disclosable pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests in connection with any items on the agenda and state the nature of the interest. So are there any declarations of interest, please?
Pat, only the normal one. My wife is a member of the pension fund.
Thank you, George. Councillor Povell.
Yes, my daughter's a member of the pension fund.
And just to say, I'm a
Councillor Gardner
of the pension fund.
Sorry, Andrew, you broke up there. Do you want to just repeat that?
Sorry, yeah, I am a member of the pension fund, but it's that small. I didn't even get a pension statement. I think it's about 300 quid.
They all count, Andrew. Councillor Rowlands.
My wife is an education development officer and she's a member of the pension fund.
Thanks, Les. Councillor Tony Jones.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Both myself and my wife are scheme members.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you, members. Item 4 is the minutes from the last meeting on pages 1 to 6 of your agenda. So we need to approve the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of February 2021. So can I move approval of the minutes and ask the Vice Chair to second that, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Povell. Members, can I take that approval by assent? Okay. Thank you, members. Those minutes are approved. Item 5 on the agenda is the Local Government Pension Scheme update on pages 7 to 14. Our Head of Pensions Administration, Yvonne Murphy, will introduce this report. Good evening, Yvonne.
Good evening, Pensions Committee. Thank you, Chair. This report provides a further update on the exit payment cap, which has dominated the LGPS for the past 5 months. Last month, Treasury announced that the 95k exit cap would be disapplied as the government found it had unintended consequences. The regulations were revoked from the 19th of March and required employers to pay additional sums where the exit cap had been applied. Since November, we have been working with employers on the impacts of the cap, so it is frustrating that these efforts have proven to be futile at this stage, although Treasury have confirmed that they will bring forward proposals to tackle unjustified exit payments. MHCLG has also abandoned its recent consultation on the reform to local government exit pay, but will consult again in line with Treasury's new proposals. I understand that won't be before probably the end of the year. The next item covers the publication of the final report on the Good Governance Review. There are a number of recommendations within the report listed under 3.9 of the committee paper. Our initial assessment indicates that we meet the criteria of a well-governed fund. MHCLG have been asked to implement the recommendations via statutory guidance or formal regulations. When this is issued, the fund will undertake a gap analysis to identify any areas of governance that need strengthening or documenting. Under paragraph 3.11, there's an update on McLeod, as Treasury has published the transitional arrangements for the unfunded schemes. As committee are aware, as we are a funded scheme, changes to the underpin in the LGPS were consulted on separately, and a ministerial statement is due by the end of April to affect the LGPS. The next items within my report relate to the 3 key provisions of the Pension Scheme Act that affect the LGPS and are listed in paragraph 3.13. And the final item that I wish to highlight is detailed in paragraph 3.14. In the government's response to the Freedom and Choice consultation in 2014, there was a commitment to increase the minimum pension age from 55 to 57 by April 2028. This broadly realised the scheme's earliest retirement age to be 10 years earlier than the state retirement age. The consultations opened on the 11th of February and closed on the 22nd of April, and the fund will be providing a response, and I will share that with the Chair prior to publication. I appreciate that the report covers various issues, and I'm happy to answer any questions on any of the issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. Yes, there's lots in there, and I know the exit cap saga has been very, very frustrating, and a lot of time been spent on that, and it's frustrating that it wasn't fully thought through before government launched this upon us, and obviously we'll have to await developments on that going forward. Do any members of the committee have any questions on Yvonne's report? No. In that case, the recommendation on page 7 is that members note the governance, resource and operational implications emerging from impending changes to the regulations and industry developments. So I will move that recommendation and ask the Vice Chair to second, please.
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Povell. Committee, can I take that recommendation? Approval by assent, please.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you, committee. And thanks for that, Yvonne.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to item 6, which is the Merseyside Pension Fund budget for 2021-22 on pages 15 to 20. And our Head of Finance and Risk, Donna Smith, will present this report. Good evening, Donna.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Committee. The purpose of this report is to request that members approve the budget for the financial year 2021-22. The proposed budget can be found as Appendix 1 to the report. The appendix also includes the approved budget and predicted spend for the current financial year 2020-2021. The report summary highlights the key financial management headlines for the fund and reports that the value of the fund as at 31st of December 2020 was 9.8 billion. It is estimated that the fund will pay 368 million in pensions and receive 172 million in contributions from employers and employees. The proposed total budget for the fund is 25.5 million, which includes 17.4 million of investment management costs to external managers. The budget for 21-22 is higher at the 25.5 million than 23 in 2020-2021, primarily due to the higher investment management fees, principally as a consequence of outperformance by external investment managers. The proposed costs represent 0.26% of assets under management. The recommendation asks members to approve the budget for 21-22 and also recommends a further report is brought to a future meeting with the final actual expenditure for this current financial year and a final budget for 21-22. As you're aware, the approval of the budget for Merseyside Pension Fund forms part of the governance arrangements of the fund. Section 2.1 reminds members of the majority of the pension fund budget is taken up by investment management costs and staffing. The investment management arrangements are subject to ongoing review with additional scrutiny from the Northern Lgps Joint Committee. For all other expenditure, there's been a careful review process with senior management. Section 3.1 outlines the method used to compile the estimates of expenditure for the budget proposed. Section 3.2 to 3.6 of the report provides narrative details of both the proposed budget presented for 21-22 and the predicted spend against the current budget for this financial year. In summary, the total spend for 2020-21 is 22 million against a budget of 23 million. This is largely due to budgeted projects and areas of work being deferred to 21-22 and some of the assumptions used for the staffing. And therefore, this underspend can be seen within the employees and the supplies sections within the appendix. The increase in the proposed budget at 25.5 million, as stated, is largely reflected in the investment management costs included within the third-party category in the appendix, and this area continues to be the largest area of expenditure. 3.3 of the report explains that these fees are largely charged on an ad valorem basis with some outperformance fees, and when the fund's asset values rise, the fees can rise substantially. When expenditure rises in this area, there is a capital appreciation increase in the fund value that far outweighs any increase in the fees paid. The costs of the pension fund are charged directly to the pension fund and are then ultimately covered by investment performance, investment income and employee and employer contributions. The full costs are estimated to be £182.44 per member, and the cost per member at Merseyside Pension Fund are competitive with other pension funds of similar size in both the public and private sector, particularly when analysed net of investment performance. The fund participates in benchmarking exercises for both the investment and the administration costs. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Donna. Any members want to ask any questions on Donna's report? No. Okay, well, just note the appendix makes quite interesting reading in terms of the impact that COVID has had on some of the items in our expenditure block, and you know, the much reduced expenditure on things like printing, travel, that kind of stuff. You can very clearly see the impact of COVID, but it's a standard report that's brought to committee. If there are no questions, I will move the recommendation on page 15. I won't read it out because it's quite long. But I'll ask the Vice Chair to second that recommendation, please.
Yes, happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Povell. And again, committee, can I take approval by assent, please?
Move, Chair.
Thank you. That recommendation is approved. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to item 7, which is the overpayment of pensions policy on pages 21 to 34. And again, the Head of Pensions Administration, Yvonne Murphy, will present that report. Welcome back, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. This report asks members to approve an overpayment of pensions policy which documents our operational practice. The policy is attached as an appendix to the report. It outlines the circumstances where money is pursued, along with the considerations as to the viability of recovery and the reasons for write-off. It also sets out the steps in place to investigate suspected fraud. The Pension Board has reviewed the draft policy and considered it fair to scheme members, the scheme itself and the taxpayer. Under the background information, it's noted that most overpayments occur due to death notifications being received after the payroll run date, and it's not possible to stop or recall the last payment. The key features of the policy are summarised in paragraph 3.4, and members will note that the fund adopts HMRC's £250 de minimis limit, which means that where there is no survivor pension or any death grant payable, overpayments that are less than £250 gross are not recovered. For any overpayment more than £250, a claim will be made against the pensioner's estate. We use the Council's debt recovery process, and for cases where the beneficiary fails to settle the debt, the case is referred to legal to consider the viability of recovery. I'm also requesting an amendment to page 7 of the policy, which is page 31 of the pack, relating to the £1,000 threshold that I have stated that the Director of Resources has delegated authority to write off. I drafted this policy last year prior to amendment of the consultation in September. Sorry, amendment of the Constitution in September. And unfortunately, when presenting this to committee, I forgot to check the minimum approval limits, which has been increased to £10,000 in the Council's Constitution. I propose to amend the policy and section 3. The last paragraph of section 3.4 of the committee paper to reflect that the Director of Resources has delegated authority to write off overpayments between £250 and the minimum approval limits in accordance with the Wirral Council's Constitution, and that debt over the minimum approval limit, which is £10,000, will be considered by Pensions Committee. This policy will be subject to annual review, and I'm happy to take any questions on the detail of the policy.
Okay, thanks for that, Yvonne. And we note the amendment, which reflects the updated constitution of Wirral Council. I trust that was clear to members. Do any members need any clarification or want to ask any questions? No. Okay, so Yvonne, do you want to just clarify exactly what the recommendation is then that we're going to approve?
Okay, the recommendation is that Pension Committee approves the draft overpayment of pensions policy, which formalises the fund's current operational practice, including the application of HMRC's statutory 250 de minimis limit, the amendment to the recording and reporting limit of the policy in accordance with the minimum approval limit documented in Wirral Council's Constitution is agreed. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much for that, Yvonne. Okay, so that's pretty clear, and that will be reflected in the published minutes, assuming we approve. So I'm happy to move that recommendation, and I'll ask the Vice Chair to second, please.
Yes, happy to second that, Chair.
Thanks again, Councillor Povell. So again, committee, can I take that recommendation by assent, please?
Approved, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you all. That recommendation is duly approved. So we move on to item 8. And again, Yvonne, this is item 8 is the non-recovery of pensions overpayments. So back to you, Yvonne.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This links to my overpayment policy, and I'm basically asking approval to write off a sum of £48,000 £750.30 in respect of pension overpayments. Legal services have deemed the debts as irrecoverable after all avenues of recovery have been exhausted, as well as considering the sensitive nature of the cases. The appendix to this report contains an exempt information and details of the individual cases. If I just refer you to paragraph 3.3 of the report, I will need to amend this section to advise that the £1,000 write-off limit is retained. This in relation to the previous report, as this is because the recommendation for write-off from legal services predates the change to Wirral Council's constitution. I will update the minutes in relation to paragraph 3.3 to reflect that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Okay, so that's clear. We stick with the £1,000 limit in this case because it was recommended prior to the change to the council's constitution. Thank you. Okay, so members, we note that there is obviously exempt information relating to this report, but at this stage, do members have any questions on what Yvonne has presented to us? No. So in that case, I will move the recommendation that the sum of £48,750.30 is approved for a write-off. And again, I'll ask the Vice Chair to second that, please.
Yes, I'll second that, Chair.
Thanks again, Cherry. And committee, can I take that by assent, please?
Agreed.
Thank you all. That recommendation is approved.
Thank you, committee.
Thanks, Yvonne. Okay, so item number 9 is the property portfolio rent arrears and write-offs on pages 39 to 42. And we'll welcome Donna back to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to request that members agree to the write-off of £592,846.07 of unrecoverable rent arrears from the fund's property portfolio. The annual property rental income for the previous financial year was £30.9 million. As members will be aware, CBRE are the managing agents for the fund's property portfolio, and amongst other functions, they have the responsibility for the collection of rent and the management of arrears. The fund seeks to strike a balance between supporting tenants during difficult periods of trading and enforcement of debt, which may result in tenants ceasing to trade. The current challenging retail conditions on the high street continue to be closely monitored. Arrears are reviewed at quarterly meetings with fund officers, and on an annual basis, CBRE produce a report of uncollectible arrears, which is attached as an appendix to the report and can be found in the exempt part of the pack. CBRE considers a number of actions for the recovery of rental arrears before any write-off is recommended, and an MPF officer, the property manager, has ongoing dialogue with CBRE on actions being taken before it gets to the write-off report. I can answer any questions on the exempt appendix and the exempt part of the meeting. However, just to say in this part of the meeting that the arrears and the tenants that are included within the exempt part have either recently entered administration or are a dissolved company. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Donna. And again, there is exempt information in the exempt agenda items on the report. But do members want to raise any questions for Donna at this stage? No. In that case, I will move the recommendation that Pensions Committee approve the write-off of uncollectible property rental income of £592,846.07. And again, I'll ask the Vice Chair to second that recommendation, please.
Yeah, happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you again, Councillor Povell. Again, can I take that by assent, committee?
Approve the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much. That recommendation is duly approved. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we move on to item 10, which is minutes of the working party meetings on pages 43 to 46. Those minutes are contained in the exempt agenda. So at this stage, we need to approve those minutes. It does say on the recommendations in your pack that members note the minutes. That's incorrect. We need to approve the minutes. So Peter, did you want to comment?
No, you've covered that for me. Thank you.
Everything. Okay, lovely. So again, I will move that recommendation and ask the Vice Chair to second.
Yes, seconded, Chair.
And I'll ask for the committee's assent to that recommendation, please.
Move, Chair.
Thank you, committee. Those minutes are approved. So that brings us to item 11, which is exempt information, exclusion of members of the public. So the following items contain exempt information, and the recommendation is that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the relevant paragraph of Part 1 of Schedule 12A to that Act. The public interest test has been applied and favours exclusion. So that recommendation is moved. Could the Vice Chair second that, please?
Seconded, Chair.
And again, I will ask committee to approve that by assent, please.
Approved, Chair.
Take silence as assent, or even non-silence as assent. Thank you all very much indeed. So that recommendation is approved. So I will now